Hello and welcome to the Third Space podcast. This is Bennett speaking, and this is episode 30. 30 episodes. I guess some people might consider that a landmark, although we didn't even really notice that it was the 30th episode, and I guess we're not two guys to stand on ceremony, so that's not really important. But regardless, in this episode, we cover a few different topics, one being what we've been up to the last few weeks since we haven't had a podcast episode. Primarily, that's because we've had busy summers. Daniel went on a trip to Alaska. I went on a trip actually down to visit Daniel. But for the first part of the podcast, we talk a bit about what Daniel saw and did in Alaska. We also talk a little bit about how much two conversational partners should consider the audience when they're speaking, whether that's in a podcast like this or a news interview or some other context. And then eventually we get to the main topic of discussion for this episode, in which I try to lay out a case for why perhaps we have a bit too much empathy in our society. Now, oftentimes you hear people say the world would be a better place with more empathy, and it sounds nice, but I think it might not be true. And so in this episode, we try to unpack that, and I try to convince Daniel that maybe that's the case. Maybe you'll be persuaded too. Maybe not. That's okay. But hopefully, either way, you'll find it an interesting discussion. So, with that, enjoy the episode.
Bennett,
It's Third Space Podcast.
It's Third Space Podcast.
With Bennett.
And Daniel.
Coming at you. Not live, but recorded.
It's live right now.
Live for us, an audience of two.
When you think about audience, you should always have them in mind, and it's weird that you have to, in some ways, think about a future audience.
It is weird.
It's inherently a future audience, whether you're a writer or a speaker. I mean, if you're a speaker in a room and you have a captive audience, that's about the only time your audience isn't delayed in some manner.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you should think about your audience? Like if we're doing something like we are now, a one-on-one conversation, how much should we have our audience in mind, do you think?
Well, it depends on goals, right? And I think our goal is just to have an interesting conversation to us, and there's some degree of trust that if it's interesting to us, it'd be interesting to others. And so then if there's a link there, then you don't have to concentrate on the audience as much.
Right. Yeah, I think for our case, it's not that important because our audience is mostly, like not not very big.
Well, exactly. Think about what's selling out. What do people mean when a band or a group or whatever, someone who reaches a degree of fame sells out? What are they saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's they're sacrificing their soul, I guess, in order to appease interests that aren't their own. Right? Yes,
that's the accusation anyway.
That's the accusation, yeah.
So let's take a band who has like a freshman album or something, and it's really good, and it's all this love and character and soul put into it, and then it goes like platinum or something.
Lil Nas X.
Yeah, Lil Nas X, a good example.
One of my favorite musicians.
So then I guess once you reach a certain degree of fame, you've reached an audience, a grander audience. So then executives, producers, I don't know, whatever, but these people come to you, I imagine, and say, okay, you've made it big. Do you want to continue to be big? And the answer tends to be, well, yeah, I like money and fame and power and all of these things. Mm-hmm. So they're like, all right, well, here is your sort of template for success. And this is what your audience wants. So then you get people telling you what your audience wants. And they want to reproduce the magic that you had on whatever your success was. It's like, oh, you have this grungy sound or whatever. So we're going to put you up with this big time producer who knows how to reproduce or capitalize on that grungy sound. But then all of a sudden it feels like you've fragmented your soul, and like you have too many cooks in the kitchen, and you have just like, you lose something, or it's like if you try to please everyone, you please no one kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. What do you think about like a news interview or something? Like a news anchor is interviewing, some expert in a field, in his field or something. Like, do you think that how much consideration of the audience should be put into that sort of situation? I actually
think it's more of a conversation with the audience than it is with the two people involved. So that's really interesting. You can think about these or political debates and stuff. Like there's the question of, what are you actually trying to accomplish in a political debate? Are you trying to win the person over? And if it's clear they're entrenched in their view and you're entrenched in yours, then why are you debating? But it's actually very clear on a, like you said, like in a news program where lots of people are watching, you're actually not talking to each other. You're talking to this grand audience and trying to win them over. So yeah, interviews are less about the interviewer and the interviewee and more about the audience, or at least, I mean, think about this, like an actor has a movie coming out and they're promoting the movie. So someone's got to interview and go, what was your favorite scene or something like that? And like, this isn't about the interviewer at all. And they're just there to promote their movie. The same way a politician's there to give their stump speech or their talking points. Like the interviewer's just, sort of a pawn. Whatever.
So do you think in the instance of a news interview or something like that, it's okay for one or both of the people to exaggerate or maybe even slightly misrepresent their views to play to the audience? Like, how much sacrifice of their real, no holds barred, honest position is okay to do if the goal really is to speak more to the audience than to each other? Is it okay to be a little bit more impolite, for example? Like, how far can you overstep what we would normally consider to be acceptable in a no audience one-on-one conversation?
Well, actually, it's funny. I kind of talk about this with my AP Lang classes, and we talk about the sense of decorum, and decorum is the audience expectation. So if you come into a debate, we expect you to sort of stand up and for your position. And it's okay in a debate format to be a little bit aggressive. And you want to play, like, you can play within those expectations. You can even challenge and push past the expectations a little bit if it's successful. But if you do it too much, then it can. So I hate to give the sort of stupid answer of it depends. But okay, take me as a teacher. There's a certain degree of expectations when I walk in the classroom of how a teacher behaves and expects. I like to challenge that a little bit by being perhaps more relaxed or
cursing
friendly,
a little bit. You've
friendly,
talked about
cursing selectively that makes build some ethos and credibility. But if I walked in and went, "Hey, yo, kids, what's up? This is gonna be the rawest class. Click and subscribe," or something like that, then I've gone too far outside, and it's very try hard and cringy and terrible, right?
Ring that notification bell, students.
Get that notification bell a little ring-a-ding-ding. Yeah, and you can imagine just it being like, oh, he's trying so hard, and so then I've failed. So in the sense that you're in a debate, and can you be rude if your rudeness is coupled with a potent burn or a potent like a moment that actually hits hard, then I think you get away with it. But if you come across as a jackass and that's it, without being coupled with like a serious point that really rocks the other side, then I think you start losing credibility. So it's all about like, and then your point to truth, to what extent can you bend the truth? Well, to the extent that, like, what are your goals? This is the problem with like politics in general, is the goal tends to be on my side so our team can gain power. It doesn't tend to be what's the best solution to a particular, political societal ill that we face or something.
There's actually a conversational incentive to avoid talking about certain pieces of a topic. Whereas in a one-on-one conversation, there's really no reason to not fully explore an idea.
Imagine how uninspiring a sincere, honest, intellectual politician would be when they say, the issue's complicated and we really don't know and no one knows. And we think if I were a betting man, I'd put my, my tokens, I'd put my eggs in this basket, my tokens, whatever, sorry. But like, they would just it would just be sort of ho-hum answers of, we really don't know, but we should probably go in this direction. And people go, what? That's your answer? Whereas the other side's going, no, this is the clear answer and it's going to be strong and awesome and great. And then people cheer. And so it would be a sincere politician would be uninspiring. And so we don't have sincere politicians. We have rah, like, go team. And then politics gets broken down to, how should we team? Should it be people for a particular idea, like, freedom, or should it be, you're on my team because of this immutable characteristic? Should we, who's the villain and who's the team? And this tends
Yeah.
to be the discussion.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah, let's put a pin in that. We may be able to come back a little bit to that a little later. But I want to ask, so there's our podcast, small audience, and we focus on conversational side, and it's probably even better for us not to think too much.
Well, I like our goals. Our goals are like actually pretend this is a in the same sense that you journal regularly.
Yes,
how can we how do we capture the nature of our discussions? And
right.
I think we're at a point where we try to structure it with some games, but we're capturing our dialogue mostly. That's a neat goal.
I agree. I totally agree. I like the way we have it set, and it's just right. It's just right for us. So that's one approach. There's the newscaster approach that we mentioned. But what about, like a really popular podcast like the Joe Rogan podcast, which is also, it's conversational. Would you say that maybe the goals perhaps on that podcast are similar to ours? Like, it is very conversational. There doesn't seem to be too much of a performative element to it, and yet it's still like wildly popular. What is that? Is that an exception, or is that something that's just?
I think the reason he is sort of the king of the podcast world is simply because he has maintained sincere curiosity, doesn't seem to have this forced teaming. He just is out there asking questions and has whoever on the podcast, as long as they're an expert and have something to say. So if you couple he's look, you can critique whether is he one of the best interviewers in the world. Does he push back? Does he know everything? Like whatever. But the point is, he actually is curious and is asking real questions. And once you reach a certain point, everyone wants to be on your podcast. You don't turn down the opportunity to get the Joe Rogan bump or whatever. Like if you have a book and just going on the show, so you're going to do it. So I think he's just in a sweet spot where he's made a career of he's not going to be like some alt-right wing guy or a left wing guy. Like he's just like, I don't like any of that. And everyone tends to agree with that in theory. Everyone, even people who are far left or far right, tend to go, yeah, I'm so sick of the political polarization and stuff. But he sort of, I think, walks the walk to a large degree. And so it's walking that walk that's so tough to do that makes him so attractive. And then everyone listens, and he's also reasonable. He's not like snooty or difficult to approach. So he's like a guy that we can go, I'm probably as smart as him, and so you don't feel. And so when he interviews people, he asks the questions that the layman would ask. And so,
how much do you think? I mean, you won't know this, but how much do you think he considers the audience when he's doing his podcast? Obviously, when he's doing stand up, he considers the audience,
a lot,
to a huge degree. But in the podcast, how much do you think he considers his audience?
My guess is he has to not, when you're getting millions of, and it's the kind of, I've heard him reference how he just doesn't really read comments on when they put it on YouTube, if they still do even. I haven't listened to him much since he went over to Spotify and whatever.
It's not on YouTube anymore.
Yeah, okay. So since then he stopped doing that, I'm assuming, because Spotify deal, whatever. But like the headache it would be to hear the massive amounts of criticism and you have to say, you would have to pay attention. You have to start to say, okay, I have an audience, but it's so wide that I need to identify what matters from audience feedback. And that's almost like, am I getting the listens, the listeners? Like, what are my numbers here? And if they dip, why? And stop listening to sort of you can imagine all sorts of criticisms of whatever, like accusations that he's not being equitable in some way or another, and how crazy that would be, or he can only do so much. So I think he has to put his fingers in his ears to some degree, to maintain sanity at that level. And also, weirdly, I think I've heard, I don't know who it was he was talking with. They said they brought up a point like you did. And they said something along the lines of, you realize you're in some ways have a disproportionate impact on shaping culture. When you have someone on, or you can bring something into the conversation that wasn't previously part of a cultural conversation. That degree of influence is terrifying. And how do you proceed responsibly, knowing, oh my gosh, like you have that much influence. And like, that's what he said. He says, I can't think about that. I believe that was his response. It's like, I'm aware on some level intellectually, but I can't think about that. I just have to have interesting people on that I'm curious about and just kind of dumb it down that way, at least. Or else it would be debilitating to consider all those aspects. And I think you end up spiraling in a bad way and locking up and not doing anything out of fear of messing up if you think that way too much.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I tend to think that, and maybe it's just my personality, but it's the harmony thing, you know? Like if I start to feel like in whatever creative endeavor, whether it's a podcast or writing or whatever I was doing, if I started to feel like I was, quote unquote, selling out or trying to speak to an audience or a segment of an audience, and I was, censoring myself or omitting information, that would make me pretty uncomfortable. I would tend to just be like, you know what, just be straightforward and honest and don't really hold anything back and let the eggs fall where they may, to use your to use your analogy. And if people like it, great, and if they don't like it, okay, like that's fine.
Well, then let me throw this at you. I agree with you, but I altered my behavior as a teacher based on feedback or statistics even? And the answer is yes. So when my early years as a teacher, I mean, a lot of people identify as being sarcastic. It's just favorable, like, oh, I'm funny and witty and I'll throw it back at you, and this dry sense of humor, be sarcastic in general. And then, and I was sarcastic. And if you're sarcastic with the right students and people, that's really powerful because they get it and they know you're joking, and it creates a bond and all of this. But a startling degree of people do not get or understand sarcasm. A startling number. I mean, I don't want to cite the statistics right now,
like
but I knew
10 people.
10 people.
10 people don't.
I'll put it this way: in any given classroom, there's a couple of kids that will not get it, and so the question becomes like, it's a high risk move at that point if I just deadpan and I say, do we have homework tonight? And I go, no, in fact, you never have homework ever. Like, or, I don't know, that's a bad example of sarcasm, but you get a chuckle from the class, and then the couple of kids are like confused. Or if I say, oh, that was a real smart answer, now there's a tinge of meanness in there. So my point is that I was fairly sarcastic, and I made a conscious effort to just say, that's not a rhetorical tool that is completely effective. Like it really ostracizes some of my audience or the kids that I'm trying to connect with. And like I can use other tools that are just as effective. So I've almost, not only in teaching have I been less sarcastic, but I think I'm less sarcastic in general.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, I don't consider you to be a very sarcastic person. I don't notice you using a whole lot of sarcasm. So it seems like the classroom persona that you're talking about, it's not a dishonest one. It's not a fake one or whatever. Like that seems to be pretty harmonious.
Well, and I came to realize that oftentimes sarcasm is some sort of wall, barrier, or protection that we use, some sort of sense of armor you put up, and so you don't have to be completely sincere, because nothing's scarier than being completely sincere. And so we live in this. You think about it, like the world has a lot. People just are like, want to critique or be mean, or there's all these other things instead of just creating and being sincere, because that's so vulnerable to create something and put it out there, very vulnerable. And just to be sincere and go, I do like this, or I love poetry and sitting on toolboxes on the back of trucks. It's right. So easy to mock.
Who would mock that?
Are you being sarcastic right now? So if I'm modeling behavior that I believe in, which I do believe in being sincere and going out there and creating, then I try to do that with students. So I just try to embrace, like, there's a lack of sincerity and vulnerability in the world, for
generally.
Sure. Yeah, generally speaking.
Would you say that you have become more harmonious over time, as in your career, that is, in front of the classroom, more harmonious rather than less harmonious? I guess that is the same as saying more sincere rather than less sincere.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, I have to rein some things in, like I have a tendency to overqualify or tell them why I'm doing something the way I'm doing. And I think that's a strength, right? If a student understands why I'm delivering this or why the prompt specifically wants you to address this, it shows some thoughtfulness. It also helps them reason through and understand the goals. Qualifying is a beautiful thing, but sometimes, say it's a freshman in high school, you don't have to walk through how you arrived at this due date, or also, if I say something like, does this due date work for y'all, or you guys, like, I better be prepared to not have it. If they say no, then I should be prepared to change it. Like, if it's going to be the due date, don't ask them if it's okay with them. Like, if this is how
Right.
it's going to be, if this is a non-negotiable, we don't need to invite a bunch of criticisms of it, because that's just going to make everyone less happy.
Yeah,
in
why
general.
even give the appearance
Yeah.
of negotiation when it's not one?
So there are parts where I've learned to just play the role, and this is how it's going to be. But yes, for the most part, I'm just more harmonious. Yeah.
Yeah, that probably, I mean, that's what I would expect. I would imagine that most people, regardless of their career, become more harmonious in it over time, simply because they're more comfortable and more experienced, and they're more aware of the nuances of, their behavior. And so
Tell me if you.
they can be more honest.
I don't think this is disharmony, but I will act like something is more serious than perhaps it is in my mind at the moment. So if a kid comes in really, really loud for the third time in a row, and I've warned him twice, come in the door, not yelling and stuff, or whatever the little infraction may be, I pull him out in the hallway, and I'm like, I have a very serious expression, and I'm making eye contact, and I give them a serious talking to.
Do you
But for
think,
me, it's not that big of it. Like, I'm just like rolling. Like, this is just something I'm doing. It's a box I'm checking off to get them to correct their behavior.
Sure.
But I'm not taking it with me where they might be rattled a bit, right? The teacher took them out in the hallway, stared me down, kind of thing.
You're bluffing, really. You're bluffing. You're being insincere, partially. I mean,
I believe in what I'm doing, the corrective measure, but
Right,
I'm just
right.
not
But
into it in the moment.
exactly, which
I'm
I mean
acting.
is a form of insincerity. I mean, you have your goals, but the impact on you isn't that great. So you are bluffing. You're trying to make the student think that you're really this is important, and you're feeling it. Do you think they see through that, or not? What's your
I
experience
don't. Well,
been?
I think there's a performance aspect to teaching in general, and you better be
Definitely,
good at, like, when you're
definitely.
not feeling good and you come in and you sell it anyway. Like, oh, you like, can't wait to teach this lesson and stuff. Like, I'm willing myself, and if I'm getting onto the student, like, a lot of it's preventative further down the road. Like, here it is. Like, most of that stuff takes care of itself early in the year. I'm having to have some more serious conversations the second, third, fourth week of school, right? Like, to make sure that the patterns of behavior, we're in a marathon together. We're gonna see each other day in and day out. Let's get some behaviors down that work for everyone. And so when I do this, what I'm saying is I'm just not emotionally invested. I'm not like rattled and disturbed by them coming in talking, right? But I know that, if this continues, I will get to a place where I'm really annoyed. So I'm just going to nip it in the bud with a very serious and stern manner. So it's all like calculated and
Right.
reasonably like not emotional. It's just
Right. I mean, it's kind of the newscaster approach, right? I mean, that's part of it. That's not our conclusion wasn't that the newscaster interview is somehow immoral or bad. It's just it's got different goals, and so when you're in front of the classroom, you have different goals. You have to consider the performative aspect, and just because it's performative doesn't mean it's dishonest.
And back to saying, does the kid read through it? Well, I think that there are times if I were just calling it in, they would read through it. I think most people can detect when people are calling it in, but I don't mean to suggest that I'm calling it in the moment. I'm just saying, and in fact, what I hope they detect is that there's no ill will. Like, when I'm getting on to a student, it's not like, you freaking kid, you piss me off. It's more just like, hey, this is how we're running the classroom. You stepped out of line. This is what I'm going to need you to do to get back into line. And it has nothing to do with like them as some moral judgment or something, but it is like a corrective. I do hold the classroom in a certain regard, and it will not continue with that with whatever behavior that was. So hopefully they detect that. Yeah. That I'm like, oh, he's not mad. He's just serious. Like, that's what I hope they see.
I definitely had teachers who tried to do what you described and were very transparent about it. It was just obvious that they had a goal and they weren't really mad. It was something that their heart wasn't really in, but they really tried to play up being mad or being serious or something, and it was just like eye rolling. So, are you kidding me? Like, my book wasn't covered with its cloth cover, and this is what
I
you're.
forgot about that.
Yeah,
That doesn't take place now. Do you remember that? Getting those little
yeah.
stretchy
The
covers.
stretchy covers. That was it, and that was a big deal, man. If you came in and your book wasn't covered, I mean, I had a teacher
It
just.
attached grades to it
I
too,
know I
right?
had a teacher that would just flip out and just be like, "You treat the book with respect," and I'm like, "Are you serious right now? Are you serious?" And trying to do the whole give a serious talk lecture about it, and it's like this is no one cares about this. Like, it just seemed to me like it was obvious that the principal or some administrator said, we have X percentage of uncovered books, and our books are coming back damaged at the end of the year, so you better make sure your students have the books covered. And the teacher had to do something with that.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that case, by the way, like as a teacher, I'm just gonna say, hey man, like they're on me. Like you're gonna get that book cover because they're on me, so I'm gonna be on you. But that's how I would choose it.
Yeah, well, that's
to deal with it.
more harmonious. Yeah, I mean, that's how I would have to do it too. Like,
And I'm not trying to sell administration down the river float, float them down the river.
floating on the river.
But I would just say, hey, some things you got to play the game of education. I mean, that's actually just a good skill for them to learn to go, hey, I got to do some things. Like I'm sure there's some rote homework, some boring homework they have to do, and it's like just do it. I mean, you could not do it and get a 0 and take some sort of stand, but you should if it's not violating some core principle to an intolerable extent, then just freaking do it. And that's just how we live life in a lot of ways. Like you're gonna have a job, you do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
All sorts of things. So
right. On a different topic, and partially the reason why we haven't done a podcast in so long is because we've had a busy summer. At least you've had a busy summer.
I have.
A little busy. You went to Alaska.
Ooh, yeah, I did. I went to Alaska with my dad.
Is this the first time you've been out of the country?
No. But also, no, it was a great trip with my dad. And like, I realized, like father-son time, I suppose when you go away to college, when you have a nuclear family and have mom and dad, and so hanging out with the family, my brother, my mom, my dad, those are just like part of the equation. So to get time with just my mom or just my dad, any extended time beyond like a lunch or a dinner here and there, or maybe a quick weekend trip or something, that's happened. But to get an extended like vacation with my dad was really, really cool. We flew into Anchorage, spent some time there, went to Juneau, spent some time there. But the thing about my dad, and he has a reputation, and you know this because you've been on vacation since we were little kids. You'd come to like, whatever, Universal Studios and some other things. My dad is a go, go, go kind of guy, like unbelievably go, go, go. He is always looking for the next adventure. He can walk for days. He's the kind of guy, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's also to a fault, I would say, because he's the kind who sits down to have dinner. Maybe we've made some plans. We're at this really cool restaurant. So the second we sit down, he's like, so what are we doing after dinner?
Yeah.
Like you've made plans all day for this dinner. This is the moment we're enjoying. And he'll say, what are we doing next? Or if there's, a cool street performer, he's like, oh, we should just walk around and stop and watch the street performers. Just really soak in the culture, But you'll see, he starts to see the street performer, maybe they're a juggler, whatever, and he'll start tapping his foot and what are we doing next? What are we doing next? So with this sort of go, go, go attitude, I was like, all right, I'm going to match his energy on this trip because it's father's son, probably the last one for a while. Like, let's like, go. I'm going to give him all the energy. If he wants to go, I'm going to say where, like the whole time.
Right.
So,
you did that?
And I did that. Yeah. Yeah.
How did it work out? Like,
well, I think he structured the trip pretty beautifully. He actually reached out to I'm blanking on the term. They map your trips for you? Travel agent. Yeah. It seems like such an antiquated, like I didn't, travel agent. I don't know. Like they just help book things and they're supposed to get you discounts. But I mean, the idea is if they have a relationship, anyway, it's a different story. Like why are there travel agents? But he we would have these festivities or activities during the day. Like sometimes it would be just like a 6 hour whale watching tour or a glacier tour. So that's going to take your day. Cause like, let's say it's at 9 o'clock, you need to be waking up pretty early, right? To get to the proper spots and make sure you're in line and have the tickets printed and all of that. And then by the time, so that just takes the bulk of your day, and then walking around the city afterward. And in Anchorage, by the way, because things are just now opening up, in terms of, post COVID, or, is no lockdown restrictions. I think people are going to Anchorage specifically in Alaska, because there's sort of this rugged individualism culture there.
Yeah.
And if you have the resources to be able to travel, like, let's go see some natural beauty and let's go there. And so they were, and in combination with, you've heard all this stuff about being understaffed restaurants due to, government handouts and things like that. Why would I work if I'm going to do better, like unemployed?
Right.
And so you've had this weird combination of a lot of people going to restaurants and not enough people to staffing it. Yeah. And so that would be a 2 hour ordeal regardless for dinner in Anchorage. And so, but that was okay. We put our name on a list and then we would walk around Anchorage.
Was it a very walkable place? Was the city pleasant to walk around?
I was a little surprised that not particularly. Juneau was beautiful. Juneau, no matter where you're standing, you're going to see the body of water. It's almost like a bowl of mountains with water in the middle, and the city just sort of next to the water and kind of going up into the mountains. And in Anchorage, it was more like, I mean, I'm not going to critique Anchorage. It's just like a kind of a boring small city, which is the biggest city there. And then there was a bay, there was a body of water there, but it wasn't visible from every place. And I think getting lumber and various, or getting everything you need to build a building. I just looked around and I was like, I don't think a building's been built here since the 80s. Everything had an older, and I'm joking. Well, I'm not joking. That's my observation. I'm sure there are newer buildings, but everything, it felt like I traveled back in time. Someone remarked that Anchorage was voted worst dressed in the nation, and I have to agree. Like the people were super nice. There's no, this is not just some mean spirited judgment. It's just like, look, it's cold there a lot, so they just layer up, and they don't care. Like during the summer, they just take some of the layers off, and so it just, people, like, caring about your appearance wasn't in the prior. Like, go to any city and walk around, you're gonna see just people done up and like caring about their appearance and all this. You just saw a far fewer or smaller percentage of people that seem to, and it just seemed to be the same with their buildings and general sense of just decor. Like look, why are you in Alaska? Why does Alaska exist? It's the natural beauty. It's the, let's go fishing and hunting and live the great outdoors and appreciate the natural beauty around us. So you don't have the emphasis on buildings, and like the food was good and everything, by the way, no criticisms there. It's just that it was not some like hipster place that has amazing restaurants and boutique food choices and things like that. It's just like, I don't consider myself much of a city boy, although I think you could say I am. I enjoy the cities and things like that, but I think I felt like a city boy there. Like I had a waiter or a waitress, and she was very kind, so I felt comfortable. And you know this about me: if I really like the waitress or waiter and they've made me comfortable, and I love sauces, so I can say something like, do you have any orange or yellow or white sauces, something creamy, a little spicy, whatever, just something fun to dip my fries in. And so I kind of gave that spiel to her, and she was like, this is Alaska. Like, what are you talking about? Like, she's like, I think we have ranch and barbecue sauce. I'm like, okay, you don't have anything like bang bang sauce? And she just had this like, what are you talking about expression. And I don't feel like I'm being such a city boy talking about bang bang sauce. I think I say that word and like most people kind of know, but so that's just a moment I felt very city boyish.
It's a cliche, right? Like, those city folks and their sauces. That's like what rural types, that's what they think when they're sitting in their rocking chairs with their pipes, and they're like, here comes the city slickers with their sauces.
Slick back hair and their
They got their
sauces.
sauce in their hair, listening to their saucy music.
Saucy. So yes, so we did a lot of walking, a lot of tours. So my dad, like I said, we did things from hiking on a glacier. You know, we put on those spikes on the bottom of your shoes called crampons to be able to like. In order to get to the glacier, we were in this giant, I'll call it a canoe. It was shaped like a canoe, flat bottom, but it held about 40 people. Wow. So, and we had to row there. And it took about 30 minutes of legitimate rowing constantly to get, and that was awesome. Right. And then in one time we went on it was only like 15-minute helicopter tour. I'll call it a tour, over the glacier into some area, I'm not really sure, up in the mountains where it's just snow covered, and then went dog sledding. And when I say dog sledding, really, I mean a very touristy thing where there was the camp, the guy who like has won the Iditarod like more than anyone had, like keeps his dogs there, and so they need training year round to prep. And so there's this camp of people. Actually, this was an all-woman camp, interestingly enough, and they would just keep the dogs fresh and take them out for rides and stuff. And so we went on a ride with them and got to play with the huskies and stuff. So
did you really cool. When you say you went on a ride, was it like some kind of tandem thing, or did you have your
yes, I was
okay.
Go ahead.
You didn't have your own little
It was very
sled.
touristy. Like it was a good picture to be like, as one, like my dad and I, we swapped spots, but like I was standing, she was mushing, I guess, or she was officially doing it, and then I was like a cart. I don't know, but I was behind her on another one where I'm actually standing, but I'm standing on these like skis things that have supports and like the thing just like what she was standing on. So I got to feel that, and then my dad was sitting in front of her, and then we switched spots, and I got to sit down and be mushed as well. It's not for lack of it takes skill and understanding and knowing the dogs and all of this. There's no way you could have just some tourists come do it, you know. I suppose possibly, but I had the dogs, and they kept emphasizing the relational aspect of dog sledding and how they just wouldn't, you know, you got to know them kind of thing. So
interesting. It seems like dogs would be a pretty poor choice for an animal to, you know, a beast of burden, basically. Seems like dogs would not be a good one.
I guess they can train fairly well. And what I learned is that they don't, our muscles and stuff get tired and then they get sore, and whatever makes our muscles sore, you won't appreciate my poor explanation of this, but as long as they will get tired and fatigued, but if you feed them properly and they get to sleep and whatever amount that they need, the next day they're completely rejuvenated. So they really can go forever if you have the proper food, you keep them warm enough and they get enough sleep. So they don't get like this. We can't, right? Like our muscles will just go, no, after 3 days of running or something, we would just collapse out of just pure fatigue. But they get completely rejuvenated and don't build up the lactic acid or whatever it is that sort of is intolerable to us and the fatigue we get. So, and they're not, huskies
Did they tell you that? That was a lesson they gave you?
That was part of what they were telling us and why.
I don't think that conflicts with what I know. I mean, not about huskies, but about humans. I mean, humans are like one of the classically, like one of the reasons we were so successful is because of our endurance. And like that's one of the things that differentiates us is that humans can just freaking run forever. They can just run and run and run. I mean, look at Forrest Gump. I mean, joke aside, like that's legitimately the case. Like humans can just.
Those special people that like have broken through and trained their bodies appropriately. Yeah, they can just every day, I suppose, do that sort of thing. But there's also a reason why you don't. Let's say it's I'm going to reveal my ignorance. I don't know how much like a marathon or all these crazy competitions where they're running 23 miles and stuff like that. Like you don't run 23 miles right up until you do like you do some crazy training, and then the week before or so you take it a little easier. You might run a couple of miles to keep your body loose. But to me that suggests something about not like you're resting up to a degree, whereas like dogs, they just keep incrementally like getting them to run longer and longer every day. until the race happens, and then they just keep going with that. So now that they're used to going for hours and hours a day,
Right.
But I don't know. I thought it was cool.
Was it fun?
Actually, it was awesome because so imagine it's this tiny little helicopter that can fit 4 people. We took one of the dog sled people who had come off their break. So they got in the plane or the helicopter with us to go back up there because they live in this little encampment for like a week. So we fly up there, the 4 of us, the pilot, me and my dad, and this woman who's going to go back to camp after her time off. And then we go sledding, and then we come back, and one comes with us to take her break for a few days because they just live on that mountain. Then they come down. So they live there for like a week or 2 or whatever it is, take a few days off, and then they fly back. But so for us, so imagine it's a 15 to 20 minute flight. It's just awesome. And helicopters are scary, by the way.
I've never been in a helicopter.
Yeah, I think they're amazing. And they're the views you can get, but the changes in altitude or little dips and that. I was very aware of how fragile it all was. Like we're in this metal frame that's not much more impressive than a vehicle, and we're just in this. The propellers are spinning quickly, but there's no gliding down if something were to go wrong. It's just like, okay, well,
that's it.
And so, but impressive views. So if you fly out there, then they give us a little lesson while they're hooking everything up and so talk to us. And then we went sledding for like 45 minutes or so. And then pet the dogs and learn some of their names and all of that. But like a weird thing too, because the ice is so white, you wouldn't think they have to put like sunscreen under their bellies and stuff because it reflects off of the ice and gets really bright.
On the dogs?
Yeah. Put sunscreen on their bellies and and then put like tar stuff around their eyes because everything's so blindingly white. Like just like football players have those little patches under their eyes. It was like that.
You would think the Huskies would be adapted to that, but I guess not. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're not like evolutionarily. They weren't like snow dogs or something. I wasn't like taking notes here, so I might be misspeaking. But they're not like designed to go in the snow as much as they're just the right size and.
Maybe some other breed of dog would actually be better.
Perhaps
maybe.
I guess, but I doubt it because they've just decided this is the right size. They were just tinier than I expected, and they're just good workhorses, and they're train, appropriately trainable, I suppose, too. Yeah. I don't know. Or maybe there is a better one, but they decided that's cheating almost. So we think the Husky's the right amount of competition worthy dog because it is a competition in a way.
Right.
It's a small circuit of people, I suppose.
They should, you know what? It's really too exclusionary. They need to start making it so that you can have different races of dogs compete. You have your Husky team, you have your Great Dane team, you have your Dachshund team. And
Dachshund, what's the wiener dog?
Dachshunds, yeah. And just
Chihuahua.
See who makes it. It's kind of like the Olympics, but for dogs, and see which one is the best.
Wow. Yeah. But so like all these tours, I mean, it's clear to me that Alaska says, okay, like tourism's a huge part of what we do, and you go on these, and they've done it, and they've gotten their formula down, and I never felt like. Because some of these things, it was like one of them was a 6-hour whale watching and glacier tour, and I'm like, I mean, I like that sound for me to even sigh sounds so silly, right? Like, of course, I'd love to go do that, but am I going to see a glacier and then see another glacier and then see another glacier and see a couple whales? And
they don't even move that fast.
6 hours, yeah, glaciers don't even move that fast. But no, it was beautiful pacing and it was gorgeous. I just felt like
did you see
the
whales?
Rhythm of things. Yeah, I saw a lot of whales. They don't jump out of the water as much as they.
Did you see them do the blow thing, their exhalation?
Yeah, lots of blowing, and then their fishtail comes and hits the water when they go back. That was really, and it's exciting being part of the fun is this sort of Where's Waldo approach of where someone sees it and goes, oh, I see it, and the captain would say 1 o'clock, and we'd all look, and then the boat would get closer, and then just the elation you'd feel when you'd see it come up and go, oh, everyone claps, and so I honestly think it felt like the social. And my dad's got his camera that can, he's taking these pictures. Oh, I got a good one, and so there's there's the reality of seeing a whale tail and then like getting a picture with a little water dripping off the back, and it looks cool. And don't get me wrong, it's like it's beautiful because if you get it right, you get these gorgeous mountains in the background and the water. It's all so gorgeous, but it really like it's just a little fin, you know, a little tail. But like for me, the joy was spotting it and the collective fascination and people being so excited because sometimes we'd sit in there, you could sit inside these boats. These, you know, they had, I mean, these are double decker, two floor inside mostly, and then these balconies around the edge. And a lot, you could sit inside and watch outside, but as soon as they'd announce they'd see one, we'd all go outside, and like, I mean, the excitement was palpable, and that made it fun. And like little kids going, "Oh, mommy!" and like, and I just enjoyed the social aspect of it.
Did you do any like pretty isolated hiking where just you and your dad went hiking on some trail through the woods?
Yeah, there's a trail I can't remember the name of in Anchorage, but like we looked and it was a 12-mile trail, and we were like, maybe we can get bikes and then maybe e-bikes. And so I'd never ridden an e-bike, and the way I imagined it was like a little it's an electric bike, right? I thought it would have a throttle and you would drive it like a little motorcycle, I suppose. That's what I thought. Right. But it's not. It's like you would put the degree of boost you would want, and when you start pedaling, the boost works with the pedal. Yes. So like imagine though if you wouldn't want to do it this way, but if you set it to like on a scale of 1 to I think 7 was maxed out. If you had it on 7 and you just start going, it's gonna boost as soon as you start pedaling, like way too fast. So you'd put it on like 0, you'd start pedaling, or even 1 because it's not gonna do too much. When you start pedaling,
when it's on
it's just like giving you this, and you can feel it, like I'm making a sound that didn't really make, but it's how it felt, right? Like,
so did the pedals actually turn the wheels, or does the electric motor only turn the wheels?
You can convert to me it seems like you could convert a bike to an electric bike, because it is like on 0 it is just a bike. And I hadn't ridden a bike, and to be honest with you, like 10 or 15 years. I don't even know when I've ridden a bike.
It's been a long time for me too.
So we were in their little parking lot, and I'm like, I told them this, and I was like, my dad's like, I haven't ridden it since I was a kid. And so we're like just like actually seeing, I mean, you don't forget to ride a bike, right? Training, it's like riding a bike. Yep. And so I'm riding it and like actually having some trouble, because it's actually this tiny narrow parking lot in it's an alleyway actually, because they had a storefront on the road property. So we're in this alleyway, and I'm a little nervous because like going in these loops in this alleyway a little tight, and I'm pretty awkward. And then once we got the hang of it, they're like, all right. And then they showed us the device, put it on 1, and in the little alleyway, I was like, oh God, like I'm probably not going to go above 1 because it like really boosts you. But on this 12-mile trail, there were times that we so if you can be cruising at like 30 miles an hour. I got up to like 28 because there was a 1 straightaway, and I maxed out and was going, and I wasn't pedaling as hard as I could because I did almost fall twice. My dad did not, by the way, but like it was really okay. So you could do the whole trip in like 2 hours, and we said it was about the equivalent. That 12-mile electric bike ride was about the equivalent of walking 2 miles or so. Yeah. And then your butt hurts a little because you're not familiar with how to, even though they had these nice big cushiony bikes.
Yes.
You know how they usually like these bananas. At least this was like 4 bananas or something. But what was, I almost want to say cute, is that so on the way down to it was actually 12 miles there and then 12 miles back. So it wasn't a loop. So we went 24 miles. So, which sounds really impressive to me. But to give you an idea of how much boost you get, even though you're having to pedal to keep it going, you almost feel like while you're doing it, it becomes this automated, like your legs are pumping up and down, but it feels like the boost is also helping you pump. It's this very peculiar feeling that I'd never experienced before. It was totally foreign, yet I adapted within 45 minutes and was like, this is cool. Like, I want one of these. And so on the 12 miles down, I was in the lead, and I was just playing it really cautiously. But on the way back, my dad took the lead. And there was one time I swear, because he's such a cautious man, especially he's such a family guy, and like he's like checks on me and all this stuff. But I swear to you, there was a part on the path that like his just boyhood like took over, and he's flying irresponsibly fast, better than his. He might be annoyed that I'd say this, but I'm going to guess more. He was going faster than his skill set would have suggested he should go.
Right.
And I was having trouble keeping up, and I'm grinning, going, "Holy crap!" Because I mean, the wind's in her hair, and it actually feels great, and I'm feeling some of this boyhood sense of joy. But also, I'm going, "The hell, Dad! Like you're flying!" And like there are bikers that will come and of varying degrees of skill as well, right? Ranging from kids who are like, "What are you doing?" and to like pros that are like, "No nonsense, get out of the way," kind of thing. And so we're flying around some corners that maybe we shouldn't. And I lost him for a little bit, and then he pulled over to the side and like, was just enjoying the landscape. And then I pulled up to him, and he was like, "I got like really going there." He was just really thrilled, and like, I was thrilled for him. That was one of the highlights of the trip. Was
that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, the independence of riding a bike. Because imagine, I mean, people who ride bikes will already know that how great it feels. But imagine, I mean, I hadn't done it in so long that it was like, oh yeah, bike riding is really cool. Oh yeah, this is a cool new experience, this e-biking. And so
yeah, that would be really fun. I mean, riding your bike through nature, through trails and stuff, that would be great. That's where bikes
along the coast, by the way, along like the water too. Like
nice.
at times it was in the woods. It was just this gorgeous path. I mean, one of the probably better bike riding experiences you could ask for. It was paved almost all the way. And, some of it was this high up in the cliff. Like, it was just beautiful. Like, can't beat it kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. That's where bikes belong and not on the road.
Yes, I'm familiar with your disdain toward the road bikers, especially their entitlement is mostly what it is, right?
Yeah, cycles. Now, if they got e-bikes, that might make things a little better, right? Because then I wouldn't have to like slow down behind them. They could just kick it into 7 and get going. That would be a little better.
I wondered. We talked about e-bikes quite a bit afterward, and he was, he's been to Japan a couple of times too, and I was in Amsterdam, which is I guess considered the cyclist capital of the world or whatever. But like,
is it really?
I think
Forget going there. Then I kind of wanted to go, but not anymore.
It's got its own lanes everywhere though, so you might be okay with that. But better. Still, it's like literally it'll have a lane with a barrier. Imagine a road and then like a tiny little barrier and then a tiny bike lane.
That's fine. See, that's okay.
But at red lights and stuff, you still have to be pretty careful, I guess, if you're taking a turn because I don't know. Yeah. But it's hordes of people and including 70-year-old women and stuff. And now that I'm thinking about like how are these women like old people like doing this, but on an e-bike, I mean, honestly, it just takes care of it for you. It's just about balancing yourself. So, and I wonder because it was very inconspicuous. The battery was just attached to the bar and it was painted all black. And then you charge the battery and you can just rotate it out and all this. Anyway, it was just like, oh, this is super neat. And I imagine a lot more like when you see some old person riding a bike, like if you just look closer, now that I know where to look, where the battery would be, I'm just imagining more have batteries than I expect or would expect or initially thought anyway.
Interesting. So, yeah, I'd like to try that. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, so the whole trip was great, and we were getting up early, going, and it's a really good feeling when you're getting up at say 6 or 7 or 8 in between there, going all day long, and then by 10 or 11 you're just pooped and you don't feel like you wasted anything. You're not like, oh, I'm going to bed early on vacation. It's like, no, you spent a whole day out, you did all this stuff, so it's a day well spent, So that's how the trips felt. Like, every day was a day well spent.
Nice. That sounds like a pretty great trip. If you were to go back, would you structure things kind of the same way?
Yes, I know that a lot of these. So some of the cruises, those 6-hour cruises, I mean, they're all premium prices. And so I only needed probably one 6-hour cruise like my favorite moment was renting those bikes and doing that trail, which the bike rental was like 40 or 50 a piece. And so.
Yeah. So it's not like it's some super expensive part of it.
Yeah. Whereas like say that helicopter tour, I mean, that gets into 600, whatever. It's like pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. So, if money was not an option, yes, I would structure it just like that. Yes, if I'm redoing things, and would I make some just sensible budgetary decisions and still have the trip an amazing trip? I would, yes. So there was no flop. There was no like moment where I was like, we really shouldn't. We did. There was a day that was built in where one day, but we didn't have a big plan other than to meet a family that he actually knows that lives there. So we were just looking for something to do, and we went to the Alaska Zoo, and so it was not good. It was actually really bad. In fact, so many animals were like not out for whatever reason, and at least we at first we did a loop, and we thought that was the whole zoo, and we had missed like a good 40% of the zoo.
Oh, yeah.
So when we found ourselves at the exit, and I started giggling, nervous, like, because like I was like, we're not going to admit that this is bad. We're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, at least we're out doing something. And I started giggling because it was so bad. And he did too. And they're like, oh, there's a squirrel. Get out your camera, Dad.
Right.
And I felt like we were being mean, because it's just it felt like a homegrown zoo that was like, and when we got there, you start to realize there's a lot of moms that clearly maybe lived nearby with their kid and had a pass to come every day, and they'd have their little popcorn, and like the kids would be like, and they're running around, and it was just not. It's just not what the tourists came to do, and so, it wasn't. It wasn't that it was terrible or like poorly maintained, but it was just not there to impress anybody. I really felt like it was just probably a storage for like animals that needed some recovery or something. A lot of zoos do this, right? They can injure animals, and it felt like it was just a half-assed zoo that was worse than. It was the worst zoo I've ever been to, and I mean by far. But I've only been to probably 5 or 6 zoos. But you would just think the Alaska Zoo, and like it's known for its wildlife and stuff, would have some impressive stuff. But no, it
was Busch Gardens a better zoo than the Alaska Zoo?
So much better. Like the animals, like so. You and I went there recently, and I mean very recently,
a couple weeks
ago.
And
ago. I think even though we didn't even go on the safari tour, which you would have been pretty impressed by, I think, but it was sort of rainy, and we were just like, kind of done for the day.
Yeah.
And the lines were getting long and all, but its zoo is really impressive when animals are out. There's also a Lowry Zoo in Tampa that's really good, but the Busch Gardens Zoo, I mean. The fact that we just saw like their alligator exhibit, like you see their alligators and you see them in a really good view of them, and they're big and they're there. I mean, It's funny. The comparison, just those alligators alone would have probably beat out
better than the whole Alaska Zoo.
I'm not kidding. Like we saw some goats. We did see a bear. There was a bear. That was their sort of hallmark features. Like it was bear. And
when I think of Alaska, I think of grizzly bears and like bald eagles. And
there was a bald eagle too, but I'll be honest, like there were so many bald eagles in nature there that seeing one in the zoo was like, okay, I mean, whatever, impressive. Cool, pretty cool zoo, pretty cool bald eagle,
right?
And then seeing a big old brown bear is awesome. But that's their main feature, and then it was just like there were some otters,
yeah.
There was maybe a small ox, or the very hairy kind, I guess. I think maybe a yak. Yeah. And so it just, and then you combine. My dad's not designed for zoos because, like I said, go go go. So you stop there, and there's a bear, and it's cool, and it's the feature, and you take a picture, and you're like, very cool. Okay, what's next is kind of the attitude, right? So
yeah, I think. I kind of am the same as your dad in that respect with zoos anyway. Like, I like animals. I think they're really cool. But, once you see it, you're like, okay, there's the animal. What's the next animal? And
I mean, yeah, you go back to the Where's Waldo thing. Part of the thing is, okay, if you can't spot the cheetah and you look, and then you finally see it, someone goes, oh, I think they're over there in the corner. And you kind of look and you're like, where? And they're like, above see that branch to the right? No. And then you see it, and there's some satisfaction in finding it. But they're in a cage. Like, so what? And if you get a bad view of them in a cage, that's even more of a bummer. Whereas doing that with whales in nature, that's really neat. I get the Where's Waldo approach to that is fun and exciting, but doing that when they're, I mean, it's fish in a barrel type thing. It's like, oh, there's a fish. It's yeah. I mean, no, it's you put it in that barrel, it's going to be there. So zoos, you don't. It doesn't feel like I got to see this animal. I don't know why, but I mean, seeing something in the wild is ultra impressive and cool. Like I would sit there and. Aside from birds, I find myself unimpressed with birds. I'm sorry for any bird
Sorry,
enthusiasts
birds.
out there, but like, it's not that cool. They're not. They are cool, but like, there was one time we were on a cruise. I will say that like, we've been watching whales and doing all this, and then they're like, "We're coming up, and there's going to be," and I forget the name of the bird. Sorry, because they're birds, whatever. But they're like, "There's some birds over here," and people are starting to get up, and I'm kind of tired, and I'm like, I don't
Nah.
want to get up and go out just to see some
See some
birds.
birds. You guys
And
can see
until we
this
pull
one.
up and we saw that it was this island with thousands of them, like, you know, almost like
Yeah.
the cliffside was moving with them, tingling with these thousands. Then it's like, okay, it takes thousands of them, but I'll get up to go see thousands of them.
Right.
But,
Right.
but if you're just like, oh, look, a seagull, it's like, I mean, how honestly, do you? I mean, don't we all feel the same? Like if a kid's like, look, I see a seagull, and you'll find yourself like looking over to spot it. I don't know why. I guess if someone just says go look at the thing, you kind of feel an obligation to go. Your eyes need to land on the thing, but my eyes are not going to land for very long on a seagull,
Yeah,
like
I see
or
what
any
you.
bird. I mean, like if it's a toucan or something with a crazy thing,
Yeah, sure.
or just,
Well, that's
but
that's what I
I
was
don't know.
gonna say. I think I'm with you. Maybe I'm not quite as down on birds as you are, but they're not that interesting unless they're doing something interesting. Like if it's a bird and he's like picking at something or picking up something in a funny way, or if it's an exotic bird, like a parrot or a toucan or a red boobied mono bird, or
Yeah, red booby mono bird.
some
Yeah.
kind of exotic bird.
No. Go with a medium exotic. Okay, so like a robin or a blue jay. So it's like, oh, look, a blue jay, and then you kind of go like, if you say that to me, I want to see the blue jay, like legitimately, like, ooh, where? And then I'll see it, and let's just say it's standing there or on a branch, and then I don't want to look for long. My like wanting to look is around 5 to 10 seconds, and then I'm
Yeah,
like ready to move.
yeah.
So am I just are we just spoiled like we're a YouTube generation where we just get, entertain me all the time and do cool stuff, whereas this is just a bird being a bird, or is it that birds just don't offer that much for me anyway?
um,
Like,
I I think it's more the latter. At least for me, there are some things that can really grip my interest, and I can look at them, just look at
how
them.
about a pretty big lizard? So if I point out to you enough that it's worthy to go, Bennett, look at that lizard, because it's, let's say, 40% bigger than a normal lizard, and you go, oh, it's pretty big. Like, and then are you already
No.
moving on to the next thing? Are you pretty excited to see this lizard?
So, I mean, if it's just a normal lizard, it just happens to be a big one. Like, I know
Yeah.
once you see it, right? Unless I'm gonna try to catch it or something, then it's like, okay, I feel kind of like the bird in that instance. It's like,
Well,
oh
same
wow.
here. That's what I'm saying. Lizards and birds. I mean, if you saw a chameleon and its tail was like weird and wound up in
Now
a
that I would look at because I
spiral,
don't
and
see
its eyes are
chameleons.
looking around, all
Yeah,
they like stay in
yeah.
place, like
I
cool
see
stuff.
that I would watch a little longer. Because I don't see chameleons very often,
And yeah,
and they're just pretty cool. Chameleons are cool animals, but even then, I'm not gonna just sit and look at it for a really long time. I don't know. Like animals have differing degrees of majesty, that you can sit and watch like a majestic animal, like a whale or something. Like if you were diving and watching a whale swim, underwater, or dolphins, playing, then that's like something you could sit and watch for a long time because it's entertaining and rare. But if it's a robin, okay, look, there's a robin. All right, still
would
there,
it?
still a robin. Okay.
I can think of a funny scenario. Let's just say I'm gonna make up a like in Florida. Let's just say that seeing the brown thrasher is super rare, and so you're with some bird enthusiast and you're on a walk, and they're like, "Oh, Bennett, there's a brown thrasher," and you look, and it's just a
It's
very
just a
boring
bird.
brown looking. It's got a white belly and it's brown, and it is
Yep.
about as boring as it can look. And they're
It's
like,
not even
"This is such a
thrashing.
rare." It's not thrashing. Right? It's just looking around and occasionally going meh, meh. And they go, "Oh, do you hear that call? That call is so unique." And like you hear how it does it 2 times, and then it pauses, and then between 10 and 15 seconds and does two more, like, meh, meh. It's like, and it's just like, there's no amount of selling it to me that this is so rare. There's only 25,000 left in the world and it's expected to go extinct in 3 years. It's like, well, okay, I'm bored of this conversation. Like if I look and it's just a brown, and I understand this is coming from complete ignorance and disinterest, but there's like like the bald eagle was going extinct, and then people said, "Hey, this thing's going extinct," and we all looked at it and go, "Well, first of all, it's a symbol for like American exceptionalism or whatever. It's our
symbol.
bird.
It's our bird.
It's our freaking bird." Like,
right.
and then you look at it and you go, it is majestic and serious and terrifying and
they're
all
big.
these things.
They're very big, and they have
big.
a huge beak.
Their face is severe, and their eyes are, and it's just like majestic is a word. Whether I've been conditioned to see it that way or not, I don't know. But it is big and ferocious and awesome. Like there's something worth looking at. So when they say that's going extinct, like it's not anymore, by the way. Do you remember growing up and being told it's like basically
definitely.
borderline extinct? And now it's not at all. And in fact, like there's, well, I don't know. I don't want to take it a step further, but they're not even endangered. They're not endangered anymore. They're just everywhere now. Like,
they go on eagle hunts all the time. Just get rid of them because they're just everywhere.
Eagle hunts.
Well, I think part of the reason too is because it's our national bird. We basically said, okay, all other countries, you're not even allowed to have bald eagles anymore. And we went and captured all of the bald eagles from the other countries and brought them back here so we would have a lot and they wouldn't be endangered here anymore. Pretty sure that's what happened. It was a big move by the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, you made the bird watchers mad, and I'll make the dog owners mad, because the same way you feel about, oh, there's a seagull, oh, there's a robin, oh, it's a brown thresher, ooh, that's how I feel when people say, look at my dog, and I'm like, okay, it's a dog, and like, it's not like I dislike the dog, just like you don't dislike the brown thresher, but if the conversation extends much more past, here's my dog, I own him, it's my pet, then I'm bored already, and that's just the way it is. Like
I got him a toy the other day, and it squeaks, and so he just tore the squeaker out,
no.
and now it doesn't squeak anymore.
Oh, wow, interesting! Wow,
look at this picture of this dog, my dog on the step, and he was being all sullen with it. Can you just see how sullen he is? Look in his eyes. Look at it.
Yeah,
look at this next picture that's almost exactly the same.
Yeah,
look how still sullen he looks.
Yeah,
but here he is happy because I told him he'd get a treat. Yeah. See, treat's one of his favorite words. So if I say,
okay.
"Hey, come on, Corky, we have a treat,"
Corky.
And then
Corky the
dog. He's a corgi, and so I thought the name really sounded nice together.
He's a corgi, and his name is Corky, and I'm kind of corky. So
I have a shirt that says it's wine o'clock somewhere or something, and then so I put corks. I have a lot of corks, so live, laugh, love, and wine.
Yeah,
Corky,
when you say all that stuff, what I hear is the bird watcher going, "Oh, do you hear his call? Wait 10 seconds. Oh man, that's the same thing. It's all the same, and it's just stop."
I'll give you that there's a silliness that dog owners can get into, that they overestimate the interest in the same way perhaps parents do with their kid, but dogs and kids more so are like vastly more interesting to me than birds. Yes. Because with they have personalities that can be displayed in some like. If I had to watch a YouTube video of rare birds or dogs being funky or something, like
the
dogs
are
being
going to be more interesting
easily.
Well, yeah, but if the dog is being funky, then that might be interesting. But if it's just look at my dog, and it's just the dog existing, it's just being a dog. He's not even doing anything. He's just doing a normal dog activity.
Look at him wag his tail. Look at him wag his tail.
No.
Look at how he turns his head to the side a little bit when I say his name.
No, stop. No, that's not interesting. Stop presenting it like it's interesting. I do not care, and I like you less for having brought it to my attention.
Pretty funny.
Yeah. I have a topic that I want to talk to you about.
Okay, I want to hear it.
I think it will be interesting, maybe. So we'll see. Let me start by asking you a question and see if you agree or disagree with this question. The
I have to.
world.
Okay, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I have to agree or disagree with the question.
Oh, sorry. I'll make a statement. Sorry, I was going to ask you the question, but then I decided to
You'll
do
make a statement.
agree or disagree. So, do you agree or disagree with this? The world would be a better place with more empathy.
Yes, is my knee jerk is yes. I mean, and so
I think
I'll stick with that for now.
okay. Yeah, I expected that is probably what you would say, and I think
And
that
almost anyone would say yes. Like, do we
That's-
want to be more empathetic toward one another? Like, would the world be a better place? Like, overall, like, I think there probably might be empathy deficits that, whatever that might mean. But yeah. So I feel pretty good about saying yeah.
Yeah, I think most people would say that, and I've seen that statement quite a lot, and I understand why people say that. I think empathy generally has a positive connotation, and you pretty much never see any case where empathy has a negative connotation, and so it makes sense. However, in this conversation, I want to see if I can perhaps convince you that the world would not be a better place with more empathy. And in fact, we have an excess of empathy in the world. I'm going to try to make the case, and we're going to see if I can convince you, or at least if I can make a compelling case.
I'm ready for the case. Can I? If this might be part of your argument, so I won't disrupt too much. But empathy and sympathy, I'd really like to delineate those. But is that where you're going to begin anyway? Or
that's point number one. That's the first thing to talk about.
Well, good, because I always get them confused a little and need a refresher, and I think that's the problem. Probably is we use them interchangeably. So go ahead, make your case.
Exactly, that's exactly right. So in fact, if I were going to alter the propositional statement, rather than saying the world would be a better place with more empathy, I would say the world would be a better place with a higher ratio of sympathy to empathy than empathy to sympathy. So more take some of those empathetic people with their empathetic feelings and exchange that for sympathy instead. So with respect to the differentiation between those two terms, it's actually confusing. A lot of people, I think, confuse the terms, and rightly so. In fact, when I was looking to get very explicit definitions in order to talk about this, I found that it seems even the authoritative sources can't decide what sympathy and empathy are.
So annoying.
Even the dictionaries can't decide what they are. So I started, with just dictionary definitions. The Oxford definitions for sympathy, it's a feeling of pity or sorrow for someone else's misfortune, or an understanding between people, or common feeling. Those are the definitions for sympathy. Okay.
A feeling of pity or sorrow
for someone else's misfortune.
But
then the second definition is an understanding between people, and then common feeling. Well, these two things, those seem like separate things to me.
Yeah.
So, and then the Oxford definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Okay, that fits more with my understanding of empathy, is that there's some shared feeling going on.
Understand and shared are important distinctions.
Yes.
But empathy, is shared. Like when you're sad, it makes me more sad because I'm with you on your sadness versus I understand. Sympathy, right. Understand.
Right. So to me, the distinction between the two words is one is understanding and one is, feeling. Sharing the feeling. So that's the Oxford kind of mirrors what my understanding was. Sympathy is to understand someone else's plight, and empathy is to feel their plight along with them. The Merriam-Webster dictionary, by contrast, says that empathy is the cognitive understanding of someone else's feelings. So that's the more intellectual, understanding.
That's what they said for empathy?
That's what they said for empathy, and they say that sympathy is feeling the feelings of the other people yourself.
This is getting muddy, man.
I know.
Yeah.
So the two primary dictionaries actually have opposite definitions for these two terms. And so I extended my search, and I looked at Grammarly, Dictionary.com, and other sources, and they say that sympathy is expressing they would variously say that sympathy is understanding or commiseration, while empathy is putting yourself in other people's shoes and feeling their situation. So it seemed, I found scholarly articles on either side debating which one was which. Very frustrating.
Really? Why debate which one? Why don't we just agree on one, then talk about the differences?
Right.
Because that's important. Like,
Yeah,
the other
right.
thing is just semantics, pure semantics.
Pure semantics. So anyway, the definitional confusion, it's annoying. And so for this conversation, we just have to agree on the definitions that we want, because the phenomenon that I want to talk about doesn't hinge on the confusion. It's not affected by the fact that there's confusion, not largely anyway. So the definitions that I want to go with is sympathy is understanding someone else's plight, right? You understand their suffering, and maybe you don't feel it yourself, but you understand it. You try to rationalize why they feel the way they do. Whereas empathy is you are taking on the same feeling. You feel sorrow for someone else's suffering. You take on some of their feeling. That was the way I understood the two terms before, and that's kind of what I want to stick with for this conversation. It sounds like that matches with what you were thinking as well.
Yes, it does.
Right.
I mean, I
sort of
don't know if it does. It does match. I want to get into debate about the word. What does it mean to understand something? But I don't know if that's going to throw you off. For now, if we just say that means to intellectually comprehend, like, what someone's going through, that's fine by me. I mean,
yes, right. I even think that the phrase "put yourself in someone else's shoes" speaks more to sympathy than to empathy, because it's an imaginative exercise, right? You imagine what it would be like to be in the situation of another person. That's very cognitive, and you're trying to understand. You're trying to look through their eyes, so to speak, and that's sympathy. Whereas empathy is more of an instinctual, emotional response. It's a I don't need to think about your situation. You are suffering, therefore I feel for you.
Do you think psychologists and therapists actually should be almost low in empathy because they're dealing with a lot of troubled people, but they should be very sympathetic but not empathetic?
Yes, totally, absolutely. I think that the argument that I'm going to present is extra applicable to therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and so on.
Maybe even teachers or
people that need to keep a clear head and make rational decisions, but also, it's their duty to understand the situation of their patients or students or whatever. I think that my argument is that sympathy is a much more useful mode of being than empathy. Not that empathy is bad or not useful. I think it has its place and certainly has historically. But in our current world, in our current culture, particularly Western culture, I think that we have an excess of empathy, and sympathy would be much better for us. That's my thesis anyway. So, with the terms defined, there are also two other terms that I want to at least put into the conversation. One is pity, and one is compassion, and we can talk about the benefits and drawbacks of each of these as well. But there's kind of a continuum that all four of these things go along. So pity, you could imagine, if you pity someone, then you acknowledge their suffering. You recognize that it's happening. Even if you don't really understand it, you don't feel along with them, but you acknowledge suffering. That's pity. At least that's the way that I'm going to characterize it. Sympathy is I care about your suffering. I understand it, and I care about it too. It's not just simply acknowledgement, it's understanding. Empathy is I feel your suffering, so you join in. And then compassion is I want to relieve your suffering. There's an active component to it where you want to lift the suffering from their shoulders.
And you don't mean to place this on a spectrum where it goes pity to sympathy to empathy to compassion. You're not saying that. You're just saying here are various definitions.
No, I kind of am putting it on a little bit of a spectrum. Like I think in terms of engagement, compassion, you're the most engaged, right? Because you're actually getting involved. There's an active component. You're trying to relieve suffering.
In terms of engagement, yeah, pity. Okay, so you go Does it actually follow that order? Like you hear something and you go, "Oh, they're hurt. I'm sad," and then you go, that would really be terrible to be in that situation. And then, ooh, I can feel. Maybe I'd jump to I'm sad. It would be terrible to that thinking of them to wanting to relieve them. It makes sense to me that you have to almost travel down. It might be quick. It might be
Yeah,
within a
right.
moment, but like you have to. It's an order of processing in some ways,
Yeah,
and
maybe
that
so.
leads to actions, behavior.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, maybe so. I'm not sure that you have to go through every step. Like, I'm not sure you
Well,
have
yeah, you
to.
could stop at pity. You could just go, ah,
Well, I'm just thinking that,
move after
if you
them.
have empathy, I wonder if you have to, if you ever have to, surely you have to acknowledge, so you have to pity, but do you have to understand, or can you just simply have your emotional reaction and feel bad for people
But by the
without
way,
understanding?
pity feels it's a little loaded because it's obviously towards something bad happening. But I think sympathy and
I,
empathy don't have to be toward a negative thing, right?
I don't think pity does either. I think that's a modern mischaracterization of the word. I don't think you. I think feeling pity is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's acknowledging of suffering, right?
I meant suffering. Does it have to be about suffering? Can't I be sympathetic or empathetic toward your like promotion or something? Or is that a weird application of the word? Like you won the lottery. Like I can feel I can why can't I exercise every all those terms, including perhaps even compassion, but not pity doesn't work. Pity just doesn't work. But I can feel empathetic and like, oh my God, he won. I'm feeling joyful too. I like that's all.
Yeah,
Like
I can see what you're saying. It wouldn't make sense to say, "Oh, he won the lottery." Well, I pity that. Like it doesn't. Obviously, it would have to be something bad. Just I acknowledge he won the lottery. I acknowledge how excited he is. That's not pity. So
right.
yeah, I guess that I see what you're saying. I It seems weird to say, "Oh, you won the lottery." I can
Yeah.
sympathize with that.
No, it seems odd too. I get it,
And
but
empathy. I mean, I guess you could say I empathize with even that seems a little weird to say. Oh, you got a promotion. I can empathize with that. It just I don't know. That seems
yeah,
weird. I
I
mean,
wanted to throw it out
I
there,
see what you're
but
saying.
to have empathy would be able to say like someone with empathy would genuinely feel the excitement along with you. It wouldn't be just like congratulations, like that's a good thing for you. It
Mm,
would be like I have a level of excitement with you right now.
right.
That seems like empathy that's fueling that.
Yeah, if I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of empathy, I suppose. I mean, it seems like if you're an empathetic person, then you're more likely to experience the feelings of others, whether they're positive or negative.
Yeah, that's all I meant. Really, is yeah, that's really empathetic people get
And
set.
so
They're more controlled by the whims of other people's feelings.
and
Yeah.
so, but just because they're empathetic, does that mean that it's empathy when they feel positive feelings from someone else? I don't know.
It
It
seems like it's the
depends.
same thing going on to me. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
it
Like,
probably is the same underlying mechanism. I just don't know that the word contains it. It doesn't really matter.
but to keep it clean, we'll keep it toward bad things that have happened.
Sure, that's fine. So there's that continuum. If you want to consider it a continuum of pity, sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Um, so my, I guess the crux of my argument. Well, let me ask you this. Let's see if I can frame it this way. How much secondhand suffering do you hear about or experience? So just in your day-to-day life, when you hear about people suffering, bad things happening to people being discomforted, upset, unhappy, whatever, how much, what percentage of the suffering that you hear about is secondhand and not not firsthand
No,
from directly in your life or like your immediate family?
I guess primarily I experience suffering secondhand through the news. Certainly, they'll be like, "Are you calling it firsthand?" If like my mom were to be sick or something,
Yes.
or okay, that's um, So yeah, I mean, given that my anyone's life, by the way, is pretty small, in terms of our sphere of influence, is smaller than the entire world and all the things going on in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the news and the sort of media diet like that I have, or anyone engaged with media, by the way, and not just that you turn it on and go, here's the whatever strand of the coronavirus, or here's the death, or here's the bad stuff happening, here's the conflict in the Middle East, whatever. So yeah, my exposure to suffering is largely secondhand. Would if you said a colleague was a colleague, or maybe a colleague's wife or something, were plagued with struggles, would that be firsthand? Are you considering that firsthand?
Yeah, sure. I would even
Okay.
consider that to be firsthand.
So
I would even say, if one of your students has,
okay, stuff that I'm experiencing that's like through people I know. Yeah, so that's, I mean, not to say that that's absent, that's certainly there,
mm-hmm.
but like the immediacy of even those struggles is this is actually peculiar realization I just had, but like every time when I wake up in the morning, I like get the daily briefing from the news through Google, and it like tells me a bunch of bad things in the world, pretty much.
Right,
you
right.
know? Um, and so that onslaught is more immediate than and persistent, because I'm continually getting, whether it's notifications or I open up a social media app. So I get a lot of that, and um, you know, less in my daily life. But I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
also I so yeah, I also am like just a healthy guy with a small life, in comparatively, or maybe not comparatively, but it's just,
Fair
so I don't
enough.
know. Okay, so
Fair,
there.
fair enough. Your experience of the suffering is, is a different topic, and I tend to agree that you tend to be a pretty healthy guy with a healthy relationship to the people around you and the information that you consume. You don't have any obvious issues dealing with your way in the world, so you probably are doing it somewhat right. But we can use you, I think, as an example of just an average normal guy, and your how often you hear about suffering anyway. You tend to hear about it overwhelmingly outside of your immediate circle of importance. It's every now and then, there will be some suffering within your sphere of influence, I guess. Your mom or a student or a coworker or something like that will have something happen to them, or will tell you about a situation in which they've experienced suffering. Um,
Right.
but it probably makes up 10% or less. Tell me if I'm wrong, of the
Yeah, I don't
total
know how
amount
to
of suffering.
catalog, like I'll have a student next year, and I'm becoming aware of their situation. They've dealt with some really radical disease they've struggled with. So in this calculation, my mind actually went to that. So they experienced some memory loss, a lot of wild stuff. So my question is like, I'm not, I know you're not asking for like a computation, but like, does that count as one moment of suffering? And then my morning today when I woke up also counts as one where they said, this corona strain is deadly. So it doesn't seem right, like to say this person's
Sure.
lifelong
I
struggle with
mean,
this illness versus this one
what
moment of bad news doesn't quite equate.
right? Well, you could imagine that you could simplify down your life, and if you had that student in your class every day, and every day in the morning you woke up and looked at all the bad news in the world, like you would still be seeing many instances of suffering on the news, and one instance every day of your student having that. And so, like, in a way, those are equivalent, or your student might even be outnumbered,
Yeah, true.
just by the number of occurrences of suffering. And there's the additional component that the bad things happening in the world every day change. There's a novelty effect. It's always something new and extreme happening somewhere in the world, but your student situation stays the same. You can become acclimated to it,
Yep.
even though it's a bad situation. Um, but yeah, you're definitely you're definitely speaking to my point here. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Um, we live we live in a world where bad things are always happening somewhere. I mean, they say life is suffering. Everyone suffers, and it's reported to us continuously. You don't have to look very far at all to find someone suffering. And so if you're an empathetic person and you feel the suffering of others, then with a world suffused with suffering, you're always going to have an opportunity to feel bad if you're an empathetic person. It's kind of a situation where, you know the phrase, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. It's kind of like that. If someone ain't happy, then an empathetic person ain't happy.
Yeah. And that makes total sense, and not a good way to, like, this is your case, I guess. You don't want to be overly empathetic, or else you're going to be a disaster all the time. There's going to be no, like, how are you going to achieve happiness?
Right, exactly. And again, I want to clarify and make sure that I'm not saying that empathy is a bad, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad emotion to have. If you didn't get up and check the news every morning, and instead, you lived a very simple life where you only interacted with the people who were important to you, and one of them had a problem, maybe your student has that problem, to be empathetic in that situation might be, and probably is, the right response. I think empathy allows you to, you're feeling some of what they're feeling, and I think it's a bonding thing, right? Like if you,
right.
if you only coldly and rationally understand a person's suffering, then your interaction with that person might feel strange because they feel really terrible. You don't feel terrible, you just understand their suffering, and so you could, once your interaction with them ends, you could walk away with a spring in your step and thinking about dinner or something, right? But if you're empathetic and you feel it, then you're kind of down along with them, which may seem counterintuitive, and I guess often in modern times it is. But in that one-on-one interaction, I think it kind of it builds a bond. Do you think that's accurate?
I do, and I think it's funny you've presented almost this linear path that went, how did it go? Pity to sympathy to empathy to compassion. But what if in order to understand someone, you actually, maybe you even should have some initial empathy that you control, like, oh, I could feel, and then you say, how do I step back, not feel the empathy to this debilitating effect, and use it to truly understand? If I can extract the intellectual benefits of understanding and have a more solidified version of what it means to understand, and then I'm in the perfect position of to have a really strong sympathy. So instead of going from sympathy to empathy, what if the empathetic person gets control of it? So it's really you can't control, if you're very empathetic, I mean, that's just going to be your knee jerk. You're going to feel emotionally pulled. Mm-hmm. And then the idea, and this is the case you're making, I suppose, is to say, how do I control that empathy, not let it get the better of me, and use it for sympathy, truly try to convert it into sympathy? Because, and it goes back to my original thing going, I want to debate the word understanding. And I wasn't doing that to be silly. I mean that it isn't just I acknowledge you have this bad thing. It's
pity.
That's pity. And then, and I also know morally that is wrong. That's still okay, it's in order to understand something, this is a different claim, but I'll stand by it. In order to really understand something, it can't just be intellectual. I think there's different components to deeply understanding a situation, particularly a socially situated one, So something really bad happens, that someone loses a parent. Well, if you lost a parent recently, you can empathize, but then use that empathy to sympathize in a really strong and powerful way. You can really understand more than, or maybe I would say more than the person who hasn't. Now, obviously, there's so many other variables, but
so to me, that sounds like you're making the case for sympathy still. If you've lost a parent and someone else loses a parent, well, now you don't have to feel their pain. You've already felt the pain, so you can, without feeling it again, you can recall how that felt. You do have a deeper understanding because you felt that feeling of loss and grief. And so you can understand where they're coming from. But to me, that speaks to sympathy more than empathy.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you. I just say it's weird though that if let's say I had recently lost a parent and then I heard someone lost a parent, I would feel the empathy gears start to wind up maybe too much, and then I'd want to convert it to sympathy.
Well, I definitely think that's the appropriate path. That's the solution to the problem that I'm presenting. Is I think that that empathetic people should focus on reeling back and stepping back into sympathy rather than living in empathy totally. In fact, I think it's my contention that empathetic people are being preyed upon, that people are taking advantage of and maliciously using people's empathy to direct them in ways that meet their ends. We see this in politics, obviously. You alluded earlier when I said we put a pin in this to speeches by politicians and debates and all of this. If you've ever watched a political debate, it's almost nothing but them trying to weaponize people's empathy, right? It's using emotionally charged language. It's bringing up that poor Rust Belt family who lost their job onto the stage, or the fighter pilot who got injured and has a Purple Heart, or the poor kid who his parents died of poverty or whatever. It's all emotional ploys, and it's all a bid for empathy, which people fall prey to that super easily, and because everyone has a mouthpiece to tell these stories that are legitimately sad stories, and that oftentimes come from legitimate problems that need to be thought about. We're just bombarded with them, and an empathetic person is having their emotions pulled this way and that. And if you don't stop and take some control of your feelings and step back into sympathy and rationalize and think, okay, I understand the situation. Now let me think, do I care about that? How much is this relevant to me? That's the more sympathetic situation that I think is healthier for everyone.
So I think I'm buying your argument. So sympathy, if let's talk in terms of utility, sympathy is very utilitarian in the sense that it will help you make conscious decisions for the good of society, whatever, I don't know, but it really helps in your equation. What is the utility of empathy?
Good question. If I had to guess, I would say it is an evolutionary trait, probably having to do with child rearing. That would be my guess. Because if your kid is in danger or injured or upset, then probably the right response is to have an intense, intimate, kind of bonding experience. And I think that if you feel the same as your child, for example, then you'll be able to have a more intimate kind of bonding experience where you'll be able to navigate the situation appropriately. That would be my guess.
That makes sense. I thought of another one too, is simple behavioral modification. So at first I thought okay, so take a comedian, they get on stage and they're bombing, their jokes aren't funny, and you can feel it in the room, and they feel miserable because this is not working and the audience is not happy, so you're becoming not happy. So you might write different jokes, but then apply that actually to general behavior. Like you're being selfish out in public and you're annoyed for, say, the line is taking too long and whatever, the DMV. And so you express and you start yelling about how this line's taking too freaking long, and you yell and you scream. But then this is good for the empathetic person to feel the weirdness afterward. Everyone stares at you like, dude, we're all in the same boat. Why, that wasn't helpful, perhaps. So you sort of, is that making sense to you, that it's a behavioral modification? So if you are empathetic, you feel after you've done something, you kind of read the room, so to speak, and if it was good or bad, you adjust behavior accordingly.
Yeah, I can see that. Actually, that's very similar to what I was saying earlier about the one-on-one situation where if someone is grieving and you and you're empathetic, and you're in the same mood as them, you feel down, just
you
like
cry
them.
with them.
You cry
Yeah.
with them, then that person, they feel more comfortable, expressing their own genuine firsthand, negative emotions or whatever. It's a bonding thing. It's about, fitting in, so to speak.
Yeah, the more empathetic, the less the person feels judged because they actually feel you matching them. So there's that. But also,
right.
but like, it could also be, there are times I'm sure someone's feeling out of control and they're crying, and they would want a sympathetic shoulder who is sturdy and not
Yes.
crying with them,
Right.
So,
Well, think about. I mean, again, this is I guess a secondary argument, but think about how fleeting and impulsive emotions are just by their nature, right? Like how like if we were totally emotionless, then we would lose part of our humanity. But if we were totally ruled by our emotions, then we would be totally wild and unable to accomplish anything. Like, emotions are impulsive and fleeting, and if you were totally ruled by that, then it would be chaos. And if those emotions spread, if everyone was very empathetic and everyone was very emotional, then it would be chaos all the time. And so if given how fleeting your emotions are, you can have inappropriate emotions. You can have irrational emotions. That might be, those two words go together very strongly. And if you're having an irrational emotional reaction, it's actually not a good thing to have an empathetic person join in with you in your irrational emotionality, right?
I mean, this matches the whole, like, you want friends that'll tell you the truth, not just yes friends that say yes to how you're feeling. But you do want yes friends sometimes. You just want someone to, you want agreeability to a degree. It can be frustrating if you just never had them. I mean, if they never just agreed with you, you probably wouldn't be friends, by the way, if you were constant tension and never saw eye to eye.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's right. No.
I think to a degree we surround ourselves with people who are agreeable to us, whether it's philosophically, politically, like emotionally. There's just something that you bond on that's important. But like, you want someone to take a stand and say you've gone too far, or you're violating. Like, here's the truth.
And I think that's proportional to. So let's see if I can formulate this right. The degree of empathy that you want someone to have is directly proportional to the intimacy of your relationship with them. So if it's your significant other, then the level of empathy that you experience, you would expect and probably want it to be somewhat high. Or good friends, you would want it to be somewhat high. But the anonymous Twitter user that you have no relationship with at all, that that posts something, some story or some outrageous tweet or something like that, then you wouldn't want to be strongly emotionally affected by that. You would want that empathy to be tamped down quite a bit, I imagine.
So what do you think happens then? You see some tearjerker paragraph written, and it does make someone puts a lump in your throat. I mean, maybe not you, Bennett, but lots of people, it puts a lump in their throat because it's well written. So are they projecting lots of similar values and feeling a sense of intimacy?
Yes. I think that's why I think that this is such a predatory thing that's happening, because we've evolved slowly over thousands of years, and we have this innate empathic response that's meant for small tribes and families and small communities. And now it's almost as if our bodies aren't prepared to hear tearjerker stories from millions of people all the time, constantly.
No, that's a good point, because and it's become formulaic, and even someone who studied the intellectual patterns that they replicate for these videos, still fall prey to them. I can simultaneously go, I'm being manipulated, and I still have a lump in my throat. Like, that's how powerful these things can be.
Right, and that's why my argument, it's not an attack on empathetic people and say, look how dumb and emotional you're being. That's not it at all. In fact, you'll find this funny. Like, I actually kind of empathize with the empathetic people, and
I'm rolling my eyes, right?
I kind of feel for them, because it's like, man, they just want to they just want things to be good for people, and
It's noble. It's just the world will be a better place.
Well, if everyone laugh each other.
Tommy Wiseau had it right.
He had it right.
But it's so clear that say, look, here's some struggling people. Here's a villain, and like, wouldn't it be better if we could just let these people be happy? And like, that's such a compelling argument. No matter, I mean, you could fill in the template with we do see it filled in a lot of different ways. But like, I am persuaded largely by like, here's some people just bebopping along and happy. Enter villain trying to disrupt their happiness. Don't you want to help them? Just tell the villain to go away and let them be happy? Well, yes, I do.
Right.
I do want the villain to go away. I just want people to live their lives and be happy. Like I do. And we all do, actually. Just with that simple narrative, who would disagree with that? Who could possibly disagree with letting someone just live their life and be happy?
Right. The problem is when you're bombarded with those stories, and rather than being simply sympathetic and understanding the situation and noting, okay, they're innocent victims and they're villains, and if in my life I come across that situation, this information is useful to me and I can understand the suffering that might be happening in that situation, rather than being like that, or having your knee-jerk empathetic response and going, oh, I feel bad for those people, and then reeling it back in and coming back to the sympathetic situation. Instead, people get stuck in empathy mode, and they see the story about the villain and the oppressed people, and they feel bad and they feel angry, and they take that into their life. And this might be a story from across the world, but they feel bad and they grieve and they mourn and they feel oppressed themselves because other people are oppressed. And then they see another story of oppression and they feel oppressed. And this happens, day by day. Every day when you wake up and scroll through your Google News feed, you see this sort of thing. And this results in people who are otherwise unoppressed and, not experiencing suffering every day.
The empathetic person convinces themselves they're oppressed to some degree.
Yes.
Or they somehow, the empathy is so strong that they become stories.
Well,
this is weird.
And this is this is something that kind of floored me a while back when, I guess it's obvious that it's true, but it's just bizarre to think that mental illness can spread. It's a contagion just like physical illnesses are. But physical illnesses, they transmit by, some pathogen or something. But mental illnesses transmit too. And you can see this, like if you, there are studies done where if you put young girls together, one of which is anorexic, or if you put multiple anorexic people together, their situation only worsens. They kind of feed and reinforce each other. If you've ever been around someone who is depressive or has high levels of consistent anxiety, then you start to feel a little bit anxious or depressed.
No, that's totally. I've been around people, that struggle, and I feel it when I. So you're saying empathy is the pathogen of mental illness?
I think so. I think empathy is the mechanism by which mental illness can spread. It's because we feel for other people that, when someone else has an illness, and it's not their fault necessarily, it's an affliction that they're having. It could be even temporary, but it's certainly not a good thing for that temporary affliction to spread and affect other people who otherwise wouldn't have that affliction. And I think that's what's happening on a societal scale. And we can see drastically increasing rates of anxiety and depression, especially in young people. Suicide rates are going up too, which is probably a secondary step from that. And I think that it's highly likely that this is because of the empathetic response, and people carelessly, or not carelessly, but just they either don't have the wherewithal, the presence of mind, or the willpower to take a step back. Like you said, probably the appropriate path is to let yourself feel a little bit, feel that natural empathetic response, so that you can increase your understanding or perhaps your bonding if it's appropriate, but then rationalize and step back and come more to sympathy. But I think people aren't really taking that last step.
It's a really powerful thought, especially in conjunction with, all right, like look at the recipe. We are naturally, perhaps from an evolutionary standpoint, we have this empathy. Lots of people do. And it's, and then we have the internet, which maybe has thrown a lot of our evolution, it's exposed us to things that we have not adapted to evolutionarily. Like we see things, we're exposed to things like faster than we were designed to. Like we were not, like our bodies and our minds were not designed to live in the world we currently do, and that blows my mind. Even like the industrial society of like saying, oh, we're going to work 40-hour work weeks, and oftentimes people work, say, 80-hour work weeks, right? Like people do all sorts of things, and we were, the mental load, and that's a little tangential to your point, but we were just not designed
it's really
for the world we live in. Like, that's upset. Talk about harmony. Oh my gosh. The disharmony that creates is wild.
Well, it's wild too, because we live such long lives now, I guess, with recent advances in medical science. But I won't belabor. I think we did that last episode. So
oh my God.
I won't do it again, but we could live to be 80 years old, 90 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to go any further, 100 years old, but and whereas, we used to not live that long.
110 years old.
110 years even, 120 maybe. But it's hard to say what the right age to die is, like it's the natural age to die, 50 like it was historically.
Well, it's like it's the hard way. It's hard to say what's the right way to live. We have the society has now presented us with all these tools that we aren't cognitively prepared to take on. That's a very big thing to say, but it's totally true. Right. Like you were just making that case. Essentially, that's the case you're making. Yeah. We are hardwired with this degree of empathy. The internet, or I'm just using the word internet to take everything. Our information world has developed so that our empathy levels can't properly
right. Well, think about this too. Think about how much we've screwed evolution, because, well, at least in terms of natural selection, because now, like we
save people. What do you?
Well, no, I'm just saying
bad situation.
I'm just saying with respect to evolutionarily, empathy probably evolved because of familial relations and bonding and stuff like that. That's my theory anyway, and I'm sure it's not a unique theory. But now we live in a world where that selection process is totally and utterly irrelevant, right? Like, we're going to survive no matter how much empathy we have, right? Like, it's not a selection mechanism. It's not like the one tribe that's totally unempathetic and is going to let their children starve. Like, they're going to die out and only the empathetic ones are going to survive. Now, empathy is not a distinguishing factor in whether or not you are able to reproduce, right?
Well, likability, there's some relationship with...
do you think it's significant enough to prevent people from reproducing? I agree that
attractiveness, I think it impacts your attractiveness. I can't say what percentage or something, but like someone who's like cold or versus too bleeding heart versus too cold, that affects attractiveness overall. So attractiveness obviously influences but no, like you're right. At the end of the day, you want to reproduce or something
even not even talking about empathy anymore, but take any otherwise negative trait, or take something like being very overweight or very weak, or having some sort of physical deformity or something. You can imagine back in caveman times, or when humans were evolving, this might have been an evolutionary deal breaker, right? You're not going to make it. Your genes aren't going to make it to the next generation, because natural selection is going to select someone more fit than you are. But in today's society, we've equalized everything. And I'm not even necessarily making the case that's bad. I'm just saying we are influencing millions of years old mechanisms of evolution, and what is going to happen, right? Like what do we select for? Like what people are most successful at propagating I don't even know, right?
It really does. We've currently thrown a wrench in the system, and it will take a long time to see what does that mean. What's the system going to do now? Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, and with respect to age, the reason why the reason why like we're sexually active when we're in our prime years is because we don't live that long. Evolutionarily, there's pressure to reproduce relatively young because you're not going to make why be able to reproduce when you're 60 years old? That's not evolutionarily favorable because most humans didn't live to be 60 years old for a long time. Now, the average life expectancy is, 80 years old, 82 years old or something, depending on...
84 years old,
84, 87, and with recent advances in medical technology. And so, you could imagine if we could somehow reset our evolutionary path at this moment and start rapidly evolving from this point, like... we would quickly evolve the ability to reproduce later and later and later in life because we're all living that long. It wouldn't be an evolutionary barrier anymore, which is kind of strange to think.
So, I mean, I think the takeaway for me is to check your empathy, see how you can use it and channel it towards sympathy, and I buy the argument. I do. I think we are hardwired to be, I guess, does that mean are we hardwired for sympathy, or are we talking about something else there? Is that the intellectual exercise of empathy?
I think we're hardwired for empathy, and sympathy is the more the more, I don't know if you would say more evolved, but certainly animals are more likely to have empathetic responses rather than sympathetic responses, right? An animal can feel. Perhaps you see these tearjerker videos of dogs grieving, when their owner dies or their dog companion dies, and that seems to me like, it seems like they're exhibiting some sort of empathy response, but you don't ever see a dog sympathizing and going, "I understand you're suffering, other dog or human." Like that doesn't make sense.
Towards some counseling or whatever.
It's not sympathy because there's no understanding there. It's not a rationalization. It's just a feeling. It's an empathetic response. And so we didn't touch on compassion very much, but to a lesser degree, I think we have, as a society, the same problem with compassion. We're too compassionate, which sounds absurd, right? That sounds ridiculous because no one would use the word compassion with a negative connotation. But I think because we have such an excess of empathy, we have people with all of these strong feelings that they're feeling from over here and over there and everywhere, and people want to relieve those built-up feelings, and so they think compassion is the way to go, to relieve the suffering. They want to go out and relieve some of the suffering, which is, again, a noble goal. But I think this feeds into the helicopter parenting sort of mentality, let me take all of your burdens off of your shoulders. I think that, there's the anti-fragility argument, right? Especially with regards to parenting, where people need to go through a little bit of suffering. It can't be undue suffering, but you need to experience some hardship and learn to overcome it. And if we're too compassionate, then we rob people of the ability to tackle their own problems.
I think, yes, but I do think if there's compassion toward more serious, you would agree with me. I assume that there's serious travesties that are ongoing in the world, and to have compassion and want to take action toward those is a noble and good thing to do.
Absolutely.
But the problem, is when has a helicopter effect, or the problem is going, this is a terrible solution, so I'll change my profile picture, or
sure,
these sort of joke, but literally people need to relieve their sense. They have this, I have energy, and I need to demonstrate that I'm. Then it really just comes back to focusing. Social media promotes this, right? How do you look during this? Where do you stand? So it's less about the travesty or the bad thing that they're feeling compassionate about. It's more like saying, do you see me and where I stand on this issue? So therefore I posted this or reposted or and so that's the joke too. That's the bad part of
that's
compassion.
Bad. That's exactly right.
I took action via putting,
the square or the whatever.
Yeah, whatever border, it is. There's so many
the border on my picture or whatever. Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's exactly right. The the inundation of our society with empathy, because of how much we're bombarded with feeling evoking stuff, like that pressure builds and people need a release, and they can either, I guess maybe they internalize that unhealthily, and that's where the mental illness increase comes from. They internalize all of that negativity and the bad feelings, or they externalize it, and if they do it unhealthily, then that's where you get the virtue signaling and the squares and then the angry and then protests and all of that sort of thing. Like, I mean, think about all the protests that we've seen over the last few years. I think that's another consequence of it's a pressure release. It's their empathy, their feelings getting all bottled up, and they're letting it out in a really ineffective way. It's rage. I would say
yeah, and then you imagine two keyboard warriors on opposite sides of the spectrum going at it, and both feeling they're getting their release of going, I'm fighting the good fight, and they both just are like jackasses.
Imagine if people used if that all that pressure buildup that we experience. Here's a potential solution. Maybe this is too idealistic, but we're bombarded. We live in this new world where social media and traditional media too bombards us with all of these stories from everywhere, and so we have this natural empathetic response, and the feelings build up. Imagine if people, instead of channeling that into changing their profile picture, or putting a border on, or keyboard warrioring it out, or going to protests, or rioting, or doing whatever, instead of doing that, if instead they channeled that energy into local volunteering organizations, or like things like that. Big Brother, what do they call that thing? Big Brother, Little Brother, what is it called, where you like
Big Brother, Big Sister,
you mentor some kid or something, or other local volunteering opportunities. Like, if you could channel all of that negativity that you're imbibing from the world and channel it into improving your locality, man, how much better would everything be if that was how you were compassionate, rather than this faux compassion of trying to pretend like you're an advocate for the latest social fad.
And you say faux compassion. I mean, it might be sincere compassion. It's just channeled improperly and inappropriately, and then you haven't. Maybe you've relieved something, but you haven't. It's just
how genuine can the compassion be if
I don't know.
If you approach it so pointlessly, I don't think that it can really. Maybe the empathy is genuine. It's
hard because all of the reasons that you take those sorts of paths, these inappropriate paths, of just are selfish, and so being selfish and empathy seem like actually opposite ends. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It seems like that. The compassion part,
if you're just changing your profile picture to say, look at me, that's what I'm calling selfish. So you're right. Like, it's hard to how compassionate can you actually be if you think that that's doing something.
Right.
Or if it ends there. I mean, I suppose there is you can be both selfish and selfless. Like, but you have to do multiple things. Someone could change their profile picture, of course, and go volunteer and do proper things. So they're saying, look at me, and I'm going to do good.
That's true.
I do think it weakens it, but I think whatever.
I have to believe in that situation that through actually experiencing the results of volunteering, which are going to have tangible, observable results, like you're actually doing something and making some sort of difference, and you're putting in time and work, versus the total absence of fulfilling response when you change your profile picture or whatever. Like, I have to believe that the person would pretty quickly come to realize that, how ineffective, how inappropriately compassionate the profile picture is, and how appropriately compassionate the volunteering is. That's what I want to believe. Anyway.
So if they're doing both things, they would start to reveal itself. But
I want to believe that. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I guess
maybe you and I are sort of on the outskirts of like what is the utility of social media, and we're more critical, and maybe a believer like in social media, and someone who does takes an uncritical eye toward it, like doesn't see it as this sort of cynical thing, and sees what we're doing is making a cultural movement, and we're like, and I'm just one small part of that, and they actually do convince themselves it's fine, and like maybe they're right. I don't know.
So that my whole argument is against that notion. My whole argument is that when you say, "Oh, we're increasing awareness of this terrible, bad thing of suffering that only affects some small percentage of people," like that's the contagion.
They might be right in that they're doing something effective. I'm saying that we were sort of just dumping on it as being ineffective, but like they're saying it's effective. Now you're saying that effectiveness is toward a negative end.
Sure. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it might actually be slightly effective, just in a bad way. You're thanks for spreading the mental illness.
Yeah, right.
Elevating
that's my response. When I see some of these things, I'm like, what are you doing? Spreading the mental illness to everyone. This is not okay. I'll probably make a post about it soon.
And I'll change my picture to whatever you do.
Please do. Please do.
It's a provocative thought. I like it.
So did I convince you a little bit? Did I make a strong case?
I think we could do I think you made a strong case for lessening our empathy and upping our sympathy, or funneling our empathy to sympathy. That's how I'd.
But man, what an impossible case to make. Well, I think a lot of it is actually because of the language, or at least the usage of the language. No one lets any negative thought enter their mind when they think of empathy. It's a totally positive word with only wonderful magical connotations.
We have a course, and I don't know the title exactly. We're doing these English electives for seniors next year, and one is called Empathy, a literature course geared toward building empathy toward others, or something like that.
No, that sounds terrible.
The main word is empathy. I'm not exactly sure what the subtitle is, but it's empathy.
That sounds like exactly antithetical to everything that we've been talking about.
I'll just send her a copy of this podcast.
Please do. That sounds like institutionalized spreading of mental illness. Like, that sounds terrible. Like, I think a class on empathy, diving into the nuances as we've attempted to do, would be really beneficial, because that would be teaching people to recognize people's suffering and then sympathize, to rationalize it, understand it. And then once you're in a position of understanding, perhaps, if it's appropriate, attempt to alleviate the suffering. That would be good to learn about. But empathy studies, something to increase people's empathy, that sounds like the total wrong move. That sounds totally wrong.
And I don't know much about the course, but I think it's just sort of framing and saying, we're going to read books to understand people.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah.
I mean, look, I sound like I'm not giving the credit it's due, but that's what I think. Like, it's like the aim is to understand different walks of life better, and so all of that is actually your argument for sympathy. So I'm sure it's a semantics issue that you would have with the course more than.
Hopefully
Anyway.
Hopefully that's the case, and
get riled up and feel worse. don't do much about it.
Well, I mean, a lot of classes now have turned into sort of activist classes, and the curriculum,
action-oriented stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And the curriculum is.
But the action is start a protest, or figure out a way to write your senator. Like, these are the actions. Instead of go out and pick up trash, like know.
Right,
or whatever it is.
I mean, and you could make the argument that it's a disconnect. It's disconnected to, if you read a story about some impoverished tribe or something, to then go out into your neighborhood and pick up trash. You could say, well, where's the connection in that? And there is no connection, but that's kind of the point, because you actually have zero relationship to the impoverished tribe, and you do have a relationship with your local community, and so. It's a transformative thing. You transform this empathy that you can't escape from because it's built into your biology, and you transform it into something useful that you can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of edu speak, and people say like we need to train our kids to be global citizens, but like I think you would take issue, and maybe I should too. Is like what? No, be a citizen to the
place where you live. To the place where you live. You will literally. I mean. You will probably never meet someone from Malawi in your entire life, right? Like, you probably won't. And so you might read about their suffering somewhere, read some news piece or whatever, and you can think like, oh man, that's really terrible. Like, that's bad. They're suffering and whatever. But why would you let that affect your life? I mean, sure, if you wanted to, you could arrange some kind of mission trip or outreach or something and travel to
Spend some
Malawi
money
and
or
do
whatever.
you could do that stuff. And people do that, and that's fine. But there's no sense in stewing in the suffering of, some tribe that you'll never ever interact with.
Well, yeah, if you take some action that's fueled by sympathy, you're saying good. Send some money if you want to relieve that and that you just decided that. But like really investigate why and what you're doing, and don't just be like the real travesty is that you get saddened and you go like, so you had movie plans that evening with your friends and you go, I can't go out because there's some suffering in this part of the world.
Right. Yeah, that's silly. Or if, you read about that suffering of, this particular group of people, and then you go out on the street corner with your picket sign and say, this is bad, this is bad. And it's not happening in your neighborhood, your state, or even your country. Then what are you doing?
I'm going to point, you're going to find this interesting because like there's a series of books on like depression and stuff. And there's different forms of it emerging that are like, so how to deal with like global issues like climate change, and it's leading a lot of people are being depressed or getting depressed in these ways because of this is exactly what you're touching on. And there's even new terminology that I wish I had handy, but like you are depressed because of the state of like humanity essentially, and these big things that are way outside of your control that are being pumped into, and it's really, and climate change is a big one, right? People just freaking like, and genuine depression stuff, not to be scoffed at, just more to be, I guess, pitied in some level, but what going, holy crap. And this is an uprise, an uptick. And, know, obviously it's partly fueled by COVID and stuff too. So you're like, if you're someone who's sensitive to that, you're overly empathetic or whatever it is, and you're told, the world's going to hell and here comes COVID. And also, it's just like, and then it's like, it's on the rise for sure. That's exactly what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's like, when you put it that way, that's why, I make the joke, like, man, I feel for these people. Like, that's gotta suck to be really empathetic. It's a funny thing to think, but like, it's tragic that the people don't, like, they haven't developed the willpower to be able to resist or to be able to cope with, I guess, their increased exposure to suffering. And it must just be a very difficult thing for people to empathetic people to step back from empathy back to a place of sympathy, to rationalize. Thank goodness I'm totally without empathy, and I'm basically a robot. I can just compute all this stuff and go beep beep boop boop. Got it. Like, I don't feel bad.
That's the way to do it.
I don't feel bad for you, but I get it. I get where you're coming from.
Well,
not really. That was fun.
I have to go to the restroom.
Yeah, I feel for you. I feel that.
Thanks, man.
I feel that. You know what? I have to go to the restroom too.
Hey, that's empathy right there, my friend.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.